Well, back out here in January, doing some work in the shop. Backhoe needed some maintenance and a couple repairs. Put a new manifold gasket on it, and exhaust manifold gasket, and these cylinders leak like a sieve, and so had to get them dried up. Gotta go get the seals for them later. That one, the pin, someone boogered it up the torch and it wouldn't come out of there, so we just took the cylinder apart that way because the pin up there was good. And then this one, the cap wouldn't come off the end, had to make a spanner wrench and it still wouldn't come out because it's just got these little the 4 holes in it for a spanner wrench. The dad had this idea. We were either going to probably figured we were going to have to trash the cap or the tube. And I think we're going to be able to save both of them, but Dad just welded this flat bar onto the end of the cap, and got a welding rod to space it off the rod. And got that on there, and then we were able to get the pipe wrench across these 2 bars and let it, we could really get a hold of it and put some twist on it, and then heated it up. And I was on that about a 4.5, 5 foot pipe there, and I was standing on it, but it finally started to move. So had to put that back together. But over here doing a little work on the 4210. Up at Half Century it ran fine, and then we'd rented a grain cart this past fall, a bigger one, to try it out, and ran it on here and it was fine. But then we went to Chisel with it later in the fall and took off for the field, and it started going, and the transmission lube and the PTO lube light kept coming on, and those are at the end of the lube circuit, which is on the charge pump for the main hydraulic pump. Charge pump's right here for the main hydraulic pump, which is out here. This is a closed center hydraulic system. Is that right? Yeah, it's closed center, but I don't think it's, or is it load sensing? No, I don't think it's load sensing. I think it's just closed center hydraulics. And anyway, so anytime you'd pull a hydraulic lever or try to steer, where it would start using any hydraulic oil at all other than the lube light would come on, and it kind of makes a little bit of a growling noise. And it made a growling noise a couple years ago. But the problem with that was these O-rings here on the charge pump, where it pushes oil going over to the filter, and then from the filter back into, I believe it's into this port here where it feeds the main hydraulic pump. The O-rings have gotten hard after 8,000 hours, which is expected, and these are the tubes here, and they had to put, there's 6 O-rings, and I had to change all those, and that fixed it then, it to quit making the growling noise. But now that we got a real problem because it's getting low on it, it's making a growling noise again, and it is losing hydraulic pressure somewhere. So I'm going to show you everything to check out on these. These are pretty much the same. If you're looking at a 4210, I think a 4175 is the same. It might be a little different actually. But 4210, 2135, 2155, 2180, all about the same. But or 4225. Basically, the first thing, you can pull the hydraulic filter apart, and Dad took it to the back already, but it didn't look bad. There wasn't any shavings in it or anything. We change that every year. The oil looked good in it. So then we pulled the cover off and checked these, make sure one of these lines weren't cracked, and they look good. And I actually started up and ran it with the top cover off, watching these lines to make sure it wasn't puking oil out somewhere. And then roll underneath here, there's this big cap you can take off on the bottom down here, which there's that steel tube laying out there about 18 inches long that runs from the bottom of the case here up to the suction tube, and it looked alright. I just pulled it out here about 20 minutes ago, and then I figured what the heck, while I got the oil drained down, we checked this several years ago before we replaced those other O-rings. But there's this screen right here, which goes in the side, and there's a snap ring that holds it in right there. And that's just a screen to keep junk out of it, and of course it looks clean too, so I know that's not the problem. If you ever go pull one of the screens out, be careful with it. They will break easy. I've never broke one, but they're not available from White anymore, so it's got no ring on it, but I also silicone it when I'm putting it back together, and then you just start gently, put a pair of pliers on here and start working it back and forth until you can get it to pull out of there, because don't break that, because you need it to run and not available anymore. But so that's basically where we're at. I could put everything back together with new O-rings and try it, but it happened all of a sudden, kind of, so I don't think that's the problem. So what I'll probably end up doing is I'll take this line off, and there's a couple other lines you got to take off. Take the hydraulic pump off, and then take the charge. Then the charge pump comes out this way, and so I think we're probably going to have to do that. Open up the charge pump and see if it started flaking off. Which the tractor's actually got over 9,000 hours now, so I mean it wouldn't surprise me, if something just decided to give up there. We keep the oil changed regularly in it, but that's just a lot of hours, and other than those O-rings, this hydraulic system has never been touched, so that's pretty good. But I'll think about what I want to do here, whether I want to put it together and try it, new O-rings, or I want to pull it apart. Well, got the hydraulic pump off. It's laying over here on the floor. Note to self, if anyone else does this, there's a de-stroking thing right here with a little wire on it. Got to take that wire off, and what that does, that makes the hydraulic pump, it takes it out of stroke so that it's spinning, but it's not pumping any oil for when you're cranking the engine. Otherwise, you get this pink wire hooked up there, and you get the pump to about right here, and the wire's out of slack, and luckily I have a pair of pliers. Get the little nut loose. Otherwise, you'd have to try to wrestle the pump back up on there and let it hang for a second to go get a wrench, take the wire loose. So just note to self. Then got this little handy thing for Christmas. Actually, me and Dad each got one. This one's Dad's. Turn it on. It's a headband, and it's like just having a light bar off one of them brand new tractors. Just right up there, right on top of your forehead for looking at stuff. But anyway, now I think you got to take these four half-inch bolts. You got to take them out, and then this plate split right there, and I think all this just slides out then. But there's a coupler here. It kind of looks like a coupler that runs a live shaft for on the 255 over under. It's probably a little bigger than that one, but where to put the wrench? Oh, there it is. Man, it's tight. Oh man, I think they're tight. I'm gonna have to get an impact. Try another one. Just get the impact screw. Well, got it all off. Turns out you have to loosen this dumb thing. You have to take the bottom bolt out and then loosen this top one at least. And the other lines, and these things got a brass nut, and naturally they round it off even with the fuel line wrench. Stupid thing, but it'll be alright, because that's all I needed it to do, is just move out of the way a little bit so that this housing there would pull off for the charge pump. And that housing has about that much, a whole bunch of shims stacked up. because that sets your right angle gear set here to depth. Actually, it's a hypoid gear set actually. Sets that gear off the live shaft with the gear on the charge pump. So you gotta clean all those up real good, and make sure that you don't change the thickness of it when we put it back together. And then this piece here would go like this up into here, and did find a problem. There's where the suction tube goes into the bottom of the charge pump. But then to get it apart, there's this nut that's in here. Takes that's right, 1.5 inch, 1 inch drive socket, deep socket, because that you got to have the 1 inch drive to get over the shaft there, or over the pump shaft. But they also had staked it at the factory, so you got to take a little chisel or punch or something and go in there and kind of try to push that back a little bit, and then you can back it off. I'll probably get a new nut. But then the bearing comes out, and you can just tap that shaft on out. Then I'll have to figure out, there's probably a torque setting, because you got to preload that, because it's a right angle. One of the gears, you can't move, or neither one of them can move. You don't want any backlash, or I mean, you want backlash, but you don't want any in play with the rollers. So I'll clean those up. The bearings actually look really, really good in it, and the charge pump looks practically new. It got just a little bit of a rub mark right around the edge there, but I mean, heck, that there's not even any wear in the center, just the tops of the lobes there showing a little wear. They're a little polished up, but they're not scored, or metal's not flaking off or anything. That charge pump's fine. The Woodruff key was actually broke, though. It wasn't completely broke, but it broke enough, so I'll have to get a new one of those. But the problem is, this shaft goes in here like this, and what happened is there's this seal right here that keeps oil, from going from the charge pump, just pushing out around this bearing here, or pushing too much oil past, and this seal's completely shot. You can see it's just completely wore that lip away there to where just the springs left. So, which I'm glad that's what it is, and found a definite problem. It was probably, depending on where that was positioned at, it probably was either sucking air or pushing oil out. It's probably dumping too much oil would be it's probably leaking off a bunch of pressure would be my guess on it. But that's the problem. Get some parts ordered, and then maybe I'll have a video putting it back together. Thanks for watching.